Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Sunday service. It's beautiful snow outside, so thank you all for willing to step out of your home and come to service. I especially would like to welcome our guests and visitors, those who are staying at the Expanding Light, we have 5 new Kriya initiates who have taken Kriya for the first time last night. And I also would like to congratulate those who have taken the meditation teacher training and have graduated today. There are 6 of them, and I would like you to stand up. This includes also, actually, there were 8 of them. David also took it, and Lipa. And I would like to ask all of us to bless them now as they go out to share those wonderful teachings. Let's take a moment here, surround them with light, and we'll send them 3 ohms. Om. Peace. God bless you. I'd like to start by reading from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's topic is We are Children of the Light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. It is common for people to perceive themselves according to their present realities. A person in ill health says, "I am ill." Few say, "I am well. It is my body that is suffering." People in low income brackets say, "I am poor." Only the unusual person will say, "Though outwardly I live in poverty, inwardly I am wealthy." Thus, when it comes to moral and spiritual development, people commonly identify themselves with their weaknesses and their mistakes. They consider it almost a sign of humility to say, "I am a sinner," though in effect what this means is that they identify themselves with their sinfulness, not with the soul's power to transcend all limitations in God. The great masters, including Jesus Christ, have always emphasized the divine potential of mankind. To encourage us, they address us as children of light, not of darkness. The Bible in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, makes the point that our true home is not the mud of this earth, but the light of heaven. No man has ascended up to heaven, it tells us, but him that came down from heaven. This passage continues, "The Son of Man who is in heaven," emphasizing that Jesus, though he lived on earth, is perceived by the eye of wisdom as conscious, even in human form, of his true reality in heavenly spheres. The way to know God is to live in godly consciousness and not to bewail our imperfection and our distance from God. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And the Bhagavad Gita states, "Seekers of union with the Lord find him dwelling in their own hearts. But those who, lacking in wisdom, seek him with impure motives, cannot perceive him, however much they struggle to do so. If you want to know God, Paramahansa Yogananda said, live in the thought that you have him already. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Gyandev McCord, and this is my wife, Diksha. And I'd like to share with you a selection from Whispers from Eternity, prayers and poems from Paramahansa Yogananda. This one is called, O Divine Sculptor, Chisel Thou My Life. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of Thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of Thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with Thy love. Let every act of my will be impregnated with Thy divine vitality. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by Thee. O Divine Sculptor, chisel Thou my life according to Thy design. You know, the topic this week, we're children of the light. The whole idea goes down pretty easily these days with any group that's going to come to a Sunday service at Ananda Village or is going to watch it on the internet. It's not a radical thought, but the question really arises, where does that get you? Okay, what are you going to do with that? There was a amusing episode that happened a number of years ago that a young woman came up to a brother disciple of Swami Kriyananda's down in Los Angeles after he had finished giving a talk, and she introduced herself to him, and she finished her introduction by saying, "My father is the President of the United States." And obviously trying to duly impress him, and it was true that her father was the President of the United States at that time, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. Because this disciple was a total no-nonsense spiritual warrior. And like as soon as that sentence got out of her mouth, "My father is the President of the United States," he came back, "My father is Lord of the universe." I suspect she got the point. But another point you can ask is, so? Great. So your father is Lord of the universe. So all of our Father is the Lord of the universe. Where does that take us? You know, it's are we just going to kind of survive on our name? We're going to be the prize pooch on the dog show because our Father is the Lord of the universe. That, you know, no facts like that, no spiritual truths like that do us any good whatsoever unless we can begin to experience them. And that's what the whole yoga tradition is about. It's not about believing this, being convinced of that, that it's really about what are you going to have through your own direct experience. You know, a number of years ago, before I really got on the spiritual path, I was living down in the Bay Area, and a friend of mine had loaned me her copy of Autobiography of a Yogi, and I'd read it and been very, very excited to read it. And I still remember that feeling of such deep, deep relief, just knowing that there are answers and that this man knew them and that he was trusting that when he said that everybody can know them. And I thought, how is it that I know this? How can I just read a book and know this? I heard many years later that he told Swami Kriyananda, I put my vibrations in that book. That's how you know. But I'd been so thrilled about the possibility of knowing God and not a little bit fascinated by some of the outlandish things that Yogananda recounted in that book, the miracles of healing and the mental telepathy and the teleportation and people having multiple bodies at the same time. It was really wild, and I thought, really cool. And as much as I wanted to know God, I was pretty interested in that stuff too. And I remember some friends and I went to a lecture given by a spiritual teacher who was very popular in those days. And one of the reasons he was popular, he was a very good speaker, but one of the reasons he was so popular is because he loved to put out what I call the spiritual fireworks. Okay, and talk about all these high spiritual experiences and the miracles and the telepathy and all this stuff. It was just, wow. It's like here I was hearing a person who had actually experienced some of that. And my friends were very, very excited about it. And then a couple of months, maybe 1 month only later, Swami Kriyananda came down to the Bay Area to give a talk. And I had seen his autobiography. I hadn't opened it, I hadn't bought it, but I'd seen it, and I knew that he was a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. So all of us thought we'd go and hear what he had to say. And to say that there were no spiritual fireworks would be, an understatement, because, Swami talked about what he usually talks about, which is things like positive attitudes and accepting what is and developing devotion and picking yourself up every time you fall and just moving forward no matter what. And I remember after the talk, we were walking out of the bookstore where we'd given the talk, and one of my friends just being visibly and audibly upset with Swami. He had given us what he called this flyleaf philosophy. This stuff that you just hear people saying all the time. And she was outraged about it, that there weren't, not even anything like mind reading in that talk or miracles of any kind. And I didn't say anything, what would I know? But I remember still having the thought in my mind, I have this sneaking suspicion that the things he was talking about or what the spiritual path is really all about. And that without that, there never are going to be any of those miraculous experiences. Never are going to be these high spiritual perceptions. It'll always just be hearing about them. And I really started to take that to heart and think that, it really is what we do in our moment-to-moment lives that is going to determine whether we believe that our Father is the Lord of the universe or whether we know that our Father is the universe. These seemingly little moment-to-moment things are really what add up to the totality of our spiritual life. I remember a few years ago, Swami was giving a talk, and he said what seems a very innocuous statement. He said, "You are what you are, not because of your skills or abilities or talents, not because of your intellect, or not even because of your thoughts. You are what you are because of what you've done. And if you did differently, you'd be different." It's that simple. And I realized that really brings it down to this moment existence. Whatever you do now is going to determine who you are and what you experience in the future. And it sounds so mundane, but it's really so profound if we'll just take that to heart. The way we talk with another individual, the way we do our work. We like to think in terms it's all about meditation. Well, meditation is certainly the core of what we do. But the quality of our meditation is going to be determined by the quality of all the moments that went before it. I often like to think that it's like, you go to a movie, you see the coming attractions of the next movie. Well, guess what the coming attractions of your next meditation are there? What is going on in your life right now? Are we paying attention? The little things, the little mundane things. Are we calling to God? Are we trying to feel God's presence? Little, seemingly such little things. And it all comes down to one really very simple statement in the reading today that you can just kind of gloss over because it sounds obvious on one level. Swami writes, the way to know God is by living in godly consciousness. Period. The way to know God is by living in godly consciousness and not allowing those thoughts that come in and say, well, but I don't have God and I want to find God. And Master had no patience whatsoever with that. He says, don't ask me when will I find God. He said, you have him already. You just have to live in that consciousness. And it takes determination. It takes an exertion of willpower to overcome the thoughts that have gone before, the thoughts that are kind of impinging on us right now. I had kind of a mini example of this earlier this week when I put a rib out. And I don't know how many of you have had your rib go out, but it's not a great experience where every breath hurts. And I was okay for most of it. At first it was, all right, okay. Then after a while it was kind of amusing, as you're telling people what happened. That sort of carried me through the morning. But it really didn't get me into the afternoon. The afternoon, the willpower had to kick in. And the only way I could be even remotely upbeat in the afternoon was just by the constant exertion of willpower and by not interacting with anybody else very often. But by the evening, the willpower was spent. But the rib was still out. And I was a little bit on the grumpy side, a little bit on the downhearted side, and all these things that you try to do in the spiritual life, keep your energy high, keep your attitude upbeat, were just kind of out of reach because my willpower was exhausted. And this is what each one of us goes through in our days when we try to practice these little attitudes of mind, the little habits of picking yourself up when you make a mistake, the habit of being kind to the person who's not kind, that after a while the willpower gets drained. It's a little harder to do that. But that's really to what we're doing is when we can do that, we're building our momentum, we're building our spiritual capital to be able to live the kind of life that we want to live, to be able to live in godly consciousness that Swami was talking about. Because even if we're not perceiving God at the moment, living in that consciousness is what is going to enable it to ever happen. Living in that consciousness is what's going to align us with God's consciousness, align us with grace. And grace is the only thing that can come in and lift us into true God consciousness. And if we're not aligned with the grace, it's like if we are wanting to see the sunrise, but we're facing west. It's not grace's fault. It's just that we're not open. We're not aligned. We're not facing in the right direction. And it can't possibly come in. So, what to do if we're striving to feel that consciousness in our lives is to appreciate the moments when at least we can think about it, when at least we can intellectually even tune in, even if not actually perceive God's presence. I've loved to meditate recently on the story of a brief interlude where one of Yogananda's disciples said to him, "When I see you, I see only Divine Mother." And Yogananda's response was to tap the disciple on the foot with his cane and said, then behave accordingly. And, he wasn't just saying, show a little respect. What he was saying is, if you have the blessing of perceiving God's presence, or if you even see a form that reminds you of God's presence, even if you don't perceive it, that is something to hold on to. That is something to use to fuel your devotion, to fuel your divine connection, and to keep the wheels turning. And the thought naturally comes, why is this so hard? Why is this so hard to do on a regular basis? If I'm a child of the light, right, ought to be easy, don't you think? Why? Why is it difficult sometimes? Why is it difficult most of the time? I had a little fun exchange with a few friends many years ago. And one of my friends had told another of my friends in a very sweet way that she was a little bit on the flaky side. Okay? And this woman turned and said, you're the second person today who said that to me. How did I get a reputation like that? And her friend just smiled very sweetly, and he said, well, the same way anybody gets a reputation, I guess, by consistent behavior over a long period of time. And that's really what it comes down to with us. Why is it difficult sometimes? Why is it difficult much of the time to have the attitudes that we know we'd like to have is because we've been behaving in a pretty consistent fashion for a long period of time, like to the tune of, well, the Indian scriptures say that it takes 5 to 8 million lifetimes even to reach the human level. And how many other lifetimes on the human level until we reach the level where we're actually seeking God. And through all those lifetimes, through the lifetimes of being rocks and plants and mosquitoes and mice and birds and dogs, all those things, how much of that time are we spending pondering that we're children of the light? Probably not much. I don't really remember what it was to be a rock. Yogananda said he could remember his incarnations all the way back to when he was a diamond. But I suspect that when I was a rock, I wasn't affirming much of anything, just sort of sitting there embodying the quality of dullness. And I'm not sure how much better it got over all the succeeding incarnations of being the gladiolas and the poison oak and the cockroaches and all these creatures working their way up the evolutionary ladder. I suspect not one of them was affirming, I'm a child of the light, I'm a child of the light. So you get to the human level and you've got pretty long track record of not having had much to say about being a child of the light. It shouldn't really surprise us if we have a bit of momentum going in another direction. But here's the good news, that all the momentum that we've established going in other directions is the result of really not putting a lot of energy into those directions. Not really trying to be a bad person or a bad dog or a bad mouse or whatever it is. Not really trying to go in any opposite direction from God, just sort of being there and doing what comes naturally. But when we get on the spiritual path and we start to put out strong energy in that direction, it's like we're tipping the scale, and we add to the positive side of the scale very quickly. When we put out conscious energy in that direction, we can very quickly begin to outweigh the 5, 10, 20 million incarnations, whatever it is, that took us to get to this point, because we weren't trying to be that way. And now we are trying to be that way. And yes, there's some work to be done, but that's the role of God and the Guru, to help us do that work, that we're not in this alone. I was just thinking the other day of the analogy. It's like, in a way, it's like learning to play tennis. There are different ways to learn to play tennis. One of them, you can just go out and try it. Another, you can practice. And there are a couple different ways to practice. You can just go out and hit against the wall. Back and forth against the wall, which is a good practice. You can get somewhere doing that. But there are a couple of downsides to that, at least when you think of playing against an actual opponent later. One of them is the wall never hits the ball back harder than you hit it. Another, you know exactly where the wall is going to hit the ball back to, and it's not going to come back with any spin that you didn't put on the ball in the first place. It's very predictable what a wall is going to do when you're practicing with it. But if you decide that you really want to be better and you decide to take lessons with a tennis pro, right? Tennis pro hits the ball to lots of different places and hits the ball high and low and hard and soft and with topspin and with backspin, lots of different unpredictable ways, and could be a little embarrassing. Okay, it can be some hard work, okay? But after a while, we realize this is what's getting me better. This is what's getting me able to handle all these difficult situations that a true opponent is going to send my way. And so it is with, God pushing us forward, leading us forward in our spiritual growth, that there will be some uncomfortable moments. There'll be some challenges. I remember a cartoon I saw a number of years ago. This young man on his knees praying fervently says, "Dear God, I really, really want to grow spiritually, but please not in any way that's painful or embarrassing." But that is the way it's going to be, and we can take up the good fun of it. And to pick ourselves up every time we make a mistake, to accept what it is that we've done, just all the things that Swamiji is counseling, that really is the way of marching forward in the spiritual path. It's just allowing that process to happen naturally. And to begin to, Swami has often said that education is about learning. Yoga is about unlearning. Just unlearning all those thoughts and attitudes that we've had for so long. I always loved what another spiritual teacher, Swami Satchidananda, once said when someone asked him, "Are you a Hindu?" He said, "I'm an undo." But that's really what's going on here. We're just trying to undo a lot. And yeah, if it's a little uncomfortable sometimes, it'll be okay, it's a little uncomfortable. There's a wonderful story about a village in India that was wanting to have a little shrine to one of the gods, and they retained the services of this sculptor to make a sculpture of the deity that they wanted to adorn this shrine. The sculptor climbed up on the hill until he found what he thought was just the right rock, and with a whole lot of trouble, he brought this boulder down to where the village was. And right at the end, as he got to the village, it sort of got away from him and hit another rock and cracked in two. But then he thought, oh, well, all right, so it'll be a smaller image of the deity, but I can still do this. And so he took out his hammer and his chisel and went to one of the two pieces of that big boulder and began to hammer on it. And the very first blow, we heard, "Ouch!" He thought his ears must be deceiving him, so he pulled back the hammer again, hit it again. He said, "Stop that!" And he thought somebody was playing a joke on him, but he looked around and nobody was there. He thought he must be imagining things. He took another blow. "Cut that out!" He said, "You're talking." He said, "Of course I'm talking. I'm talking to you. Stop hurting me." Okay. So the sculptor walked over to the other half of the boulder. And he thought he'd give that one a try. And he positioned his chisel and took one blow, and he got, oh! He wasn't sure he'd heard anything, so he took another one. "Ouch!" He thought, you too? You can talk too? He said, yeah, I can talk, but go ahead. No, I don't want to hurt you. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Just keep on doing what you're doing. And so the sculptor kept hammering at that rock, chiseling off little pieces over and over and over again until finally what remained was an image of the deity. And the image was put atop the pedestal, the shrine, and there was a great dedication of this new shrine to happen. And people came from far and wide for this dedication. And the priest went to pour the milk and honey over the statue, but the statue was too high to reach. And so he asked some others to bring the first rock over, slide it over so he could step up and reach high enough. And he stepped up on the first rock and poured the milk and honey over the image of the deity, and the celebration was had. And after a while, everybody went away. The bottom rock said to the top rock, he said, "What is this? I had to sit down here in the mud, and this guy standing on me with his grimy feet? So what kind of treatment is this?" And the rock that was the deity said, "Well, my brother, you're forgetting something." He said, "You could have been where I am right now, having milk and honey been poured all over you, but you weren't willing to go through the pain that was involved in becoming the deity. If you'd been willing, I would be in your place now as a stepping stone, and you would be the deity." And that's really what it is for us, too, to allow God, to allow the Guru to come in and help that transformation to take place and give us the experiences that will enable us to practice all these little moment-to-moment practices of picking ourselves up when we make the mistake, of keeping the positive attitude, staying upbeat even when your rib is out. All the little things that make up the spiritual path, that make up eventually God perception, because we undo all the little tangles that have been leading us to think that we're not a child of the light, that have been making us forget that our Father really is the Lord of the universe. And when we can, so what does that thought that we're children of the light buy us? It buys us a lot. It buys us, number one, the confidence that it's worth trying. There's something that's possible. It buys us the motivation to really want that. It buys us the resources. If we're children of the light, we have a power within us. Within me lies the energy to accomplish all that I will to do. One of Swami's affirmations for self-healing. Behind my every act is God's infinite power. And the fourth thing is we have connections. Our Father is the Lord of the universe. We have a very powerful friend in a very high place that will help us get to the point where it's not just believing that we're children of the light. It's not just being convinced that we're a child of the light. It's knowing through our own direct experience that we're a child of the light. That's when the spiritual path really comes together for us. May we all reach that point.